Today we check out different operators you can use in your C++ journey. First, we look at arithmetic operators that you should mostly know. Afterwards, we will check out the comparison operators, then logical operators, and lastly, as a bonus, we check out how you can spice up the assignment operator. First, let's look at some basic arithmetic operators. Plus for addition, minus for subtraction, asterisk for multiplication, and the forward slash for division. Now on the screen you have some examples for those operations, but I assume that you already know how those work. On the left we have the statements that we have in code, and on the right we have the results that is now stored in X after those operations were executed. One thing that is important to mention is when dividing an int by another int, it will not return a float. Basically what happens is that the division is calculated as normal, but then the result gets truncated after the decimal point. Next, we have the modulo operator. This operator returns the division rest. Let's have a look at two examples. So let's assume we have 5 modulo 3. We know that the 3 fits in once in the 5, leaving 2 rest. And the 2 is basically what we get returned by modulo. If we do 50 modulo 51, we can't fit the 51 at all into the 50. Therefore, we have a division rest of 50. Lastly, we have operators for incrementing and decrementing a variable by 1. This can be either placed in front or behind the variable. If you place it in front of a variable, it is called pre-increment. Here is some example code. We can see that the variable is initialized with 5. Then we print the value, but also we are using the pre-increment operator at the same time. And in the last statement, we just print the value again. As you can see in the output log, we increase the value of X before we print it. So you can see pre-increment as increasing the value before you use it. Like mentioned before, you can also place it behind the variable. In this case, it is called post-increment. We have the same lines as before in code. First we initialize it to 5, then we print a log, but here we change it from pre-increment to post-increment. And lastly we print it again. As you can see now we print the original value of 5 in the first log, but then in the second log we print the value of 6. So basically in a post-increment you first use the value, for example in this log statement, and after you have used it you increment its value by 1. Next, we have the comparison operators. With them, you can compare two values to each other and evaluate if the given condition is true or false. So, if we want to ask if X is equal to Y, we can write it like this. Let's assume we have X equals 5 and Y equals 7. In that case, we can see that Y is not equal to X and therefore this comparison would return false. However, if we change Y to 5, then we can see that X is equal to Y, which leads to the condition to be true. But what other operators are there? As already described before, we have the double equal sign, which stands for X equal to Y. We cannot just write one equal sign because this is recognized as the assignment operator. If we want to check if X is not equal to Y, then we can write it like this. If we want to check if X is greater than Y, we can write it like this. If we want to check if X is less than Y, we can write it like this. If you want to check if X is greater or equal to Y, you can write it like this. And lastly, if you want to check if X is less or equal to Y, you can write it like this. Logical operators basically let you combine multiple conditions into one. First, we have the AND operator. If we have a condition 1 and a condition 2, this statement will only be true if condition 1 and condition 2 are both true. So, as an example, we can say 3 is less than 5 and 5 is greater or equal than 6. Does this result in true or false? Let's see. We can see that 3 is less than 5, so we know that that part is true. Then we can see that 6 is greater than 5. Therefore, the second condition is false. Since we have true for condition 1 and false for condition 2, this statement results to false. One interesting fact is, if we switch condition 1 and condition 2 in this example, the program would have only evaluated 5 is greater or equal to 6. Since this statement is already false, the program knows that the AND operator can only result to false. Because, like said before, both conditions have to be true so that the AND operation can be true. Next, we have the OR operator. If we have condition 1 or condition 2, this statement will be true if at least one condition is true. As an example, we can say 5 is greater or equal to 6 or 3 is less than 5. Does this result in true or false? Like before, we can see that 5 is greater or equal to 6 is false, and that 3 is less than 5 is true. Since we are using the OR operator, it is enough that only condition 2 is true. Therefore, the entire statement returns true. As with the AND operator, if we switch the conditions and evaluate the condition again, we can see that 3 less than 5 is already true. Therefore, we already know that the entire OR statement will be true, since at least one condition is already true. Lastly, we have the NOT operator. That one can be used to negate a logical value. So if we say not true, this would result in false. And if we say not false, this would result in true. When we are talking about operators, we also have to make a brief excursion to operator precedence. This means that if you have different operators in sequence, the program has rules to identify which operator to execute first. I will put a link in the description that has a table with the precedence of the different operators. You will also see a lot of additional operators, but don't worry, you will encounter them along the way or don't need them at all. So, one example for the precedence. If we write not x and y, it will first negate the value of x and then use the AND operator to combine the negated value of x and y. If you want to negate the return value of the AND statement between x and y, you have to use parentheses. So in this case, you have to write it like this. Then, first, the AND operator between x and y would be executed, and afterwards, the result of this statement would be negated. So, as a takeaway from this section, remember that some operators will be executed before others. If you want to force that one operator gets executed before another one that has a higher precedence, then you have to make use of parentheses. As promised, I give you additional tools to spice up your assignment operator usage. Let's say we have the variable x and want to add 5 to it and store this new value in x. What we could do is write x equals x plus 5. However, there's also a shorter version how we can write it in code. Basically implying that we want to add 5 to x and then store the result of this calculation as the new x. This can be achieved for a lot of operators, and I will show them on the screen right now, but basically they all proceed in a similar way. They first execute the operation with the current value of the variable and some additional value that gets passed into this operation, and the result of the operation is then stored as the new value of this variable. First, congratulations, you made it back again to the exercise section. And this one is hopefully quite fun, because I will provide you with code snippets and you just have to write what would be stored in the variable. Let's see an example. Here we would write in the first line x equals 5 because we initialize it with 5. Then in the second line we would write x equals 25 because 5 times 5 equals 25. And in the third line we would write x equals 23 because 25 minus 2 equals 23. So, here's the first code snippet. Here is the second code snippet. And like always, if you have questions, write them in the comments and I will try to help you out. Otherwise, see you next time.